Welcome back to Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and today we're checking out The Deadly Assassin from the Fourth Doctor era.
This is going to be so
Well,
fantastic.
yeah, you've been very excited to talk about this one.
I have.
Um,
I certainly have.
can I just I'll double check
Mm-hmm.
a couple things.
Mm-hmm.
So, am I right in saying that this is the story immediately following the departure of Sarah Jane?
Yes, it's
Okay,
right after.
that's what I
Right
thought.
after the Hand of Fear.
Yeah, because I remember for a lot of the first episode thinking, okay, there's no companion, but then I remember, oh, and okay,
Mm-hmm.
I think I remember it being discussed at some point that Sarah Jane left because the Doctor was called back to Gallifrey and humans weren't allowed.
It's been ages since I've seen the Hand of Fear, but I mean that's not surprising.
This is stuff that was brought up in School Reunion in Series 2 of the Revived era.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah,
Cool.
I just remember it from
Yep, no, that makes
brief
sense.
mentions there.
Yeah, yeah.
Is Leela's the
Yeah.
companion that follows this, right?
Yes, yes.
Sure. So they wanted to do a Time Lord story,
Mm.
and they put it in the middle of two companion spots. And I don't think that I don't really sense the loss of a companion in this story, honestly.
Yeah, neither do I. And I think they were taking a risk doing that.
Mm.
And they even do kind of take a risk, with all the crazy world building that they're doing. Because
Yeah, I was about to say
it's
this.
hard to have a fish out of water character,
Mm.
but they still manage it pretty well.
Yeah, I mean this is the first proper Time Lord and Gallifrey story that we're looking at for the podcast.
Yep.
I'm not sure how much that's established here is being established for the first time or is built on
Hmm.
stuff that's already been established. You'll have to talk me through that as
Mm.
we get to that section of the podcast. But I'll open up by saying that I thoroughly enjoyed this story. I thought it was really great.
Yep. When we were doing the Leisure Hive, and I did my lame, the show's bananas. That is so much more true here because, like, pardon me, but holy shit, this story is insane. There is so much stuff happening in it. And it's funny because, as we've probably said, Doctor Who, sometimes, Classic Who especially, the plot feels a bit stagnant. You feel like, oh, there should be something more happening here, or couldn't you shorten the story? We dealt with this with the Time Meddler. But, like, that is definitely not the case here. There is
Well,
so much happening. It's even more quickly paced than the Happiness Patrol. I feel like there's something new happening here every 2 minutes,
mm,
and what is happening is nuts. I think it's crazy. The only bit for me that doesn't do that is that bit in episode 4 when everything kind of slows down for a bit and they're discussing the Eye of Harmony and Rassilon's sash and things like that. But apart from that, I feel like there's just so much happening here.
see,
And for that reason, it's quite exciting.
I'm not sure I agree with you completely there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that for
Mm-hmm.
the most part, yes, like they're throwing a lot at the wall. They're doing quite a lot, but it doesn't feel like that for a lot of it. It's sort of disguised
Mm-hmm.
as this strange like assassination story. It's disguised as a standard assassination, clearing my name story. But there's a lot going on besides. I'll get to
Yeah, yeah.
more of my problems with the narrative in a bit. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
open the floodgate a bit too early. I want to do the
Yeah,
rankings
fair enough.
first. So this is the eighth highest rated Fourth Doctor story overall.
Yeah, I believe that.
It
Yeah,
falls between
sure.
the horror of Fang Rock and the Ark in Space,
Yeah, sure. Sure.
and its average rating is 8.6 out of 10.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I think that's pretty fair.
I agree. It's
Hmm.
at the very least
I mean, I know we...
at the very least I see why it is that ranking. I might go a bit
Yeah.
lower,
I like...
but
I,
we'll figure that out in a bit.
yeah. I mean, I might go a tiny bit lower as well, but we don't do things by half, so...
Yeah,
But yeah, we'll get into that later.
Plot 8.6.
Yeah, I think it's maybe not quite that high. The plot's pretty good. Again, for me, I think it's pretty fast paced. It certainly felt that way for me because there's a lot of wacky, wacky stuff happening. I find there are a couple of then I don't think they're quite plot holes, but I feel like there is so much world building going on here that the way they're mapping it onto the plot, it almost buckles under the weight of everything they're trying to throw at the audience. It doesn't quite get there, it just manages to make it all fine, but there are moments where it's really struggling.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I definitely felt
yeah,
that at certain points, but I think
yeah, yeah,
there is sort of a strength to the sort of simplistic plot they have at the start, where it's
mm,
the Doctor has to stop the assassination, and then when that doesn't work, he's been framed for it. That's a
mm,
that's a pretty easy plot to follow. But I
mm,
think the
yeah,
the
yeah,
amount of stuff that they throw into that story, that this presidency challenge and all this stuff, like
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
it keeps it from being stale, I think, which is why I think it's so effective
yeah,
as is. uh
yeah.
8.8 for acting.
Yeah, I mean that you could argue that the Time Lords themselves are they're very British actors,
Oh
apart
yeah.
from Castellan, who's got this sort of I don't know, like a vague Eastern European accent, but they're very they're a bit mannered and theatrical, but that works within the context of the story because they're meant to be portraying the Time Lords as this unbearably corrupt legion of sort of sycophants and fools and cowards.
Well,
So it's fun watching them behave that way.
it's the planet of the bureaucrats.
Yeah, absolutely. Just even the ending when Bruce is like, and Doctor, 9 out of 10. Like it's such a sort of assholish British thing to say, especially even just with the mannerisms, and
Yeah.
it's really fun.
Well, I
Um,
mean, it is Gallifrey is like almost quintessentially British down to like every facet of what we know about it.
yeah,
Families from rich upbringings are allowed to send their children to the
mm,
academy where they're trained to become the
mm,
highest upper echelon, the lords and ladies
mm,
essentially of Time Lord society.
yeah,
And there's a monarchy, and every now and then when they
mm,
have a big name your successor, pass it down through the generations.
mm.
And we'll
Well,
televise
that's
it
the thing.
all
They
because
call
this
him
is a
the
big
president,
thing.
but
Yeah, and there are
mm,
these different claves of Time Lords, all
mm,
from different sort of areas of the planet. I think there's
mm,
and they all wear different colors, almost like house
mm,
crests. Like it
yeah,
is so British, it hurts sometimes.
yeah. Um, and they say it's a president, so that it sounds something that's quite
Oh yeah, it's
democratic,
my mistake.
which to
Yeah,
an extent it is because they sort of sometimes vote, I think, is what they were saying. But the fact that he's even naming a successor, like, that's not really democracy.
that's not what a president does.
Nah.
8.4
So
for effects,
yeah.
which
Um,
for the most part, sure. I mean, it helps that the third episode is
yeah.
very woods based. Not a lot of big
Yeah, very
effects
sort of
going on
around
there.
the BBC quarry and in the
Yeah.
woods.
I don't think that
um,
the Master's face is particularly convincing.
no, I'm comfortable with that, but yeah, but that's completely fair
Oh no,
to
I'm
point that
comfortable
out.
with it
It's
as
clearly like just a sort of a plasticky mask, so
yeah. No, it's something that you get used to. I don't
yeah.
think anything else is particularly bad in terms of effects.
Yeah, and some of it
The
is pretty decent. Like even the Eye of Harmony looks pretty cool, and the way
Yeah,
that it's directed, where the camera's clearly shaking, but it feels apocalyptic, which is really cool.
yeah. I
So,
think the only thing that really distracted me is the way that they
hmm
teleport the TARDIS into the council chambers. Just because it's
hmm
so like the majority of the time you have the TARDIS fading in and out, and it again it's obvious that it's not
mm,
actually teleporting. They're just doing a camera trick, but it's subtle
mm,
enough that you can overlook it. But when they actually put the distortion effect on top of it and it goes all pixely, to
mm,
me it's just kind of,
mm,
well, you don't need to
hmm
do that.
hmm
TARDIS's Time Lord
yeah, yeah,
technology, you can just
mm,
say their teleportation technology looks the same whether it's TARDIS is
hmm
materializing or being teleported. Like you don't need to add
hmm
pixels to it
hmm
that make me go, oh, I'm looking at pixels.
yeah, fair enough.
It has an 8.6 for replay value.
It I might put it slightly lower than that. I found, again, there was some sort of world building and sort of plotting consistencies that I noticed more on the second viewing, but it was still really damn entertaining, particularly um, as the story progressed. So, yeah, put it slightly lower than that, but I can understand why people would say it.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And 8 people out of
Mhm.
68 say that this story requires a previous. I think that, I mean, for the master stuff,
Wait, sorry,
sure.
but
8 out of
say
6,
say the number again.
8 out of 68.
I'm surprised it's that low,
Well, here's the thing for the
honestly.
for the for the master dynamic. Absolutely, I mean, they give you all the
Mm,
information, but it does help knowing the master doctor
mm,
dynamic. But it certainly
mm.
helps that there is no companion that you need to get to know.
Yeah. But like even and I know this kind of goes back to an issue you raised earlier, but a lot of the world building because there is a lot of stuff that's introduced in this story, which we'll get to. But even the basic building blocks of Time Lord society, of regenerations, like I I would be concerned if I said, "Oh yeah, you want to get into Doctor Who? Watch the Deadly Assassin as the first story." Like, there's so much wacky world building that you would surely have to have a at least some kind like a basic understanding of to
Yeah,
engage with this story. You need to be aware of some of the history.
yeah, no, I get that.
It's throwing in so much world building as it is. It can't afford to really um, tread back too much.
Yeah.
I mean, it does a little bit, but not heaps. So
Oh, yeah, no, I definitely
yeah,
agree with that now. Um,
hmm
yeah, let's jump into the story. So,
sure, sure.
the Doctor is called away from his TARDIS by a premonition that he gets of himself assassinating the Time Lord President. What an opening shot that is!
Mm,
Like, it's certainly a scene that it hooks you pretty quickly because even if you're not
mm,
thinking, "Oh, the Doctor's going to do this," you're certainly thinking,
hmm
"Well, what's happened here then? Why is this a
hmm
thing that's happening now?"
yeah,
And honestly, I'm pretty impressed by the loftiness of this story because when I first saw this, I was
yeah,
terrified that we weren't going to see the assassination attempt until the end of the story, and the entire time it was just going
mm,
to be this weird investigation as to who's responsible and why the Doctor's seeing this.
mm,
But they get it out of the way at the
mm.
end of episode one. I'm
Yep, yep.
I'm
Good
impressed.
cliffhanger.
Yeah, it's a great cliffhanger, but I'm just impressed that they didn't do the well, for the most part, they didn't do the classic series thing of watch episode one and then skip to the end to see if this actually happens or not. No, no, you kind of need to watch everything.
Yeah, yeah, because there's a lot of weird twists and turns and new information getting revealed pretty quickly.
Uh,
Um, yeah.
I guess you take the reins on this. What does this episode introduce to the world of Doctor Who?
Oh god, there's so many things, and I'm not even sure if a lot of them show up again. But like the whole the recordings of the Time Lord's brains getting put into this machine. The I think this might be when the Matrix is introduced. Certainly the idea of the Doctor going into the Matrix like that is introduced here. Um, and I think even the last 13th generation, this might be the first time that's introduced because that's a big thing for the Master. He's basically dying. He's
I
on his
was
last
I
legs.
was curious
Um,
about that, whether or not the regeneration limit had been
yeah,
introduced before this or not.
yeah. Um, I think this is the first. That oh God, what else? Because there's so much the more intricacies of Time Lord society. Because we get that Time Lords are these lofty sort of characters, but we really get to see sort of the more nitty gritty of how their society works, and again how unbearably corrupt they are. And incidentally, and I, you know what? Yeah, screw it. We're gonna say this. Remember that moment in the Timeless Child where the
Yep.
Doctor's like, "Why would they lie?"
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
that's right. They're
to that I say, remember this episode where the Doctor says, "Of course you would change history to suit your image."
Yep, and that like
But why
didn't
would they lie though?
doesn't Barusa Yeah, doesn't Bruce say something like, "Oh yeah, no, we need to change the facts to like to suit our needs or something like that." And one of the bits that I like about it, and I don't know how intentional this was, but you get this kind of uncomfortable feeling that the Doctor's kind of complicit in it. He's not really fighting against the corruption of the Time Lords because he
Well,
just kind of leaves and
because
lets them
I
get
think
along with
in
fudging the truth and erasing and changing history.
I think in this instance, I don't think the corruption is necessarily that awful because all they're corrupting is how the rest of the universe sees them. It's not really like they're doing it
But
for
it's
any.
still
It's not like
there's still something disturbing about it.
I think there's no exploitation happening, so it's not that
Hmm.
bad. And I think also at the time there's a lot of master stuff, which is definitely worse to be talking about. And it's not like
Mind
it's also
you,
not like the Doctor he doesn't support it. Like
no, no,
he
no.
looks down on it, but I think he knows that there's nothing he can do to really
Yeah,
Time Lord's got a Time Lord.
yeah. And I think, well, here's the thing. The one thing, like the bit with Goth, where they're basically making him, yeah, because they basically try and make him into a sort of hero, which he wasn't. That bit, I think, was probably the most uncomfortable bit.
Oh
And I
yeah.
wonder, indeed, if there isn't, it's part of some of the parallels. And by the way, and here comes our segment of the week. What are you talking about? Doctor Who only got political in the Chibnall era. Oh wait, what's that? There's a really clunky, unsubtle reference to the CIA in this episode. I don't remember that at all.
That was
This is
so
this totally
jarring.
this totally isn't meant to be some sort of slightly forced remake of the Manchurian Candidate. The CIA is not being condemned in this story at all. That you're just imagining that, guys. What are you
Yeah.
talking about? No, it's the parallels to I think, as you say, British society, but even American society, like the fact that they're worried about their image and their standing in the world, like that. I don't know. I feel like there are parallels of that in a lot of modern history. So it's like, yeah, of course this is political. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
And
it's
it's
nonsense.
it all feeds in again to how unbearably corrupt these people are. And I love the fact that, again, for all the world building they're throwing at you, again, this is not a story I think for a first time Doctor Who viewer.
Definitely not.
Um, I love the way that they're working in that corruption angle, even into the tiny little details, like the guy who's got the hearing problems, just the way he speaks, he keeps saying, yes, I saw, him crowned, what, and it's just, it's such a, again, it's such a quintessentially upper
Well,
class,
also the
British upper class whole thing to do that I just
there is something to that the small element of
love
the
it.
story. It doesn't really come up that much, but the idea that
Hmm.
I think it's what's his name? It's Engen. How he's talking about the Time Lord
Hmm.
technology. Oh, it's
Hmm.
impossible that there's no way anyone could tamper with this. You need my key. I'm the only one that's
Hmm.
got it, and also all the Time Lord high ups got it. No, there's no way that anyone could
Hmm.
break into this. And the Doctor's like, oh, you mean
Hmm.
this prehistoric tat? Yeah, anyone could. You kidding me?
Yeah,
The idea that they're
and
so
it's
stuck in their
hmm.
ways, they see themselves as like
Yeah,
these
as
highly
the
evolved and sophisticated beings who look over all time and only observe, but they're
yeah,
falling
and
behind as a result. They're stagnating.
yeah, and it's funny, but that element, as I've said before, this story almost buckles under the weight of its world building. That is one of the elements where they were taking a real risk there, but I think it really pays off because in almost every line that these characters speak, or for the most part at least, you just feel that sense of corruption. Like the fact that a rogue Time Lord would dare, try and destroy the planet in the form of the Master. Like he says, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna put an end to this miserable planet." And you know what? You think to yourself, I mean, it's obviously awful that a lot of people would die, but you think maybe there's a reason the Master's so angry because like these are really corrupt people. They are
Yeah,
really, really, really corrupt. So
but
when you have these insane oversights happening where you have, oh, yes, no one could break into this technology. That's not possible. No one's evil enough or no one's smart enough to pull one on us. You think, well, actually, yeah, you morons. You're a bunch of corrupt fools. And
but
everyone, your world's about to collapse, and that's your fucking fault.
yeah, I mean,
Anyway.
I get that they're all super corrupt, but this is still one thing I'm not quite. There's one thing I don't quite follow about the Time Lords in this episode. Maybe
Hmm.
you can clear
Hmm.
this up for me.
Yeah.
Um, because
Yep.
I get that they're these stuffy bureaucrats who will twist the truth to fit their
Yep.
own image, and they're all like,
Yep.
we have to maintain a certain look, and we have to
Mhm.
adjust the events surrounding this evil guy's death to make him look like a hero to suit our needs. I get all of that,
Yep. Mhm.
but why would they lie? I don't understand why they'd lie. Why would they do that?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to
I mean,
me.
it's not like in like 8 years later in Trial of a Time Lord, where the Doctor says 10 million years of evolution. That's what it takes to be really corrupt. It's not like they
Mm.
threw some trumped up genocide charges against the Doctor in that story because he made a split second decision that unfortunately did wind up destroying the Vervoids. It's not like you had the Valiard corruptly coming in and trying
I
to
mean,
take away one of the
I have
Doctor's regenerations.
I
Like,
have no idea what you're talking about. It's not like the Time Lords would say during the Time War try and destroy the time vortex itself and ascend to higher beings. They would never
yeah,
ever do that.
no,
They would never trap the Doctor in billions of years of his own personal hell just to extract a tiny bit of information about the hybrid from him. There's no way they would do that. Why would they
no,
lie?
no. Of course, yeah, exactly.
Wait, no,
What?
you're
They're
Sorry, I misspoke. They would do all that stuff because it happened. They just wouldn't lie. They're very honest about their corruption. That's what it is. They wouldn't lie.
yeah, yeah. That's the big problem in the takeaway. So this episode clearly puts a lie to the fact that they don't lie.
Yeah,
Because again, they are all really corrupt in this story, and I really do enjoy again just those little nuances, which as I said again, puts the lie to the fact that Doctor Who, it supposedly was only political when Chibnall came
yeah.
along. No, this is clearly political. This is clearly like a remake of the Manchurian Candidate. They're calling out the CIA for God's sake in a really unsubtle way, and the
That
fact.
was bizarre.
Oh no, that was terrible. That was a really bad bit of dialogue. It made me. I laughed at it both times when I watched the story, but I know I'm
So,
laughing at that at least slightly ironically
is
because it's
the CIA,
yeah.
is that just a thing for this story, or has that been established prior to this?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure it's just a thing for this story.
Okay, that it confused me. That confused me so much when I first saw that because I was like, hang on, what?
Because I'm not, I haven't seen the movie. I don't know too much about it, but I think the Manchurian Candidate. It was a film. It came out, and I think it was 1962, and I think it's basically the same story. A guy gets framed for the assassination of the president. But I think there's a lot of government conspiracies, and I think there's even like sort of mind control, I think gets thrown in there as well. So I'm convinced that the CIA reference is probably just a Manchurian Candidate reference 'cause it's about government conspiracies and corruption and things like that. So that is why I'm convinced that element is there. Um, yeah. So the takeaway from this section, guys, Time Lords lie. Get used to it.
Mm. No. The Timeless Child episode had it right. It's every other episode that's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, because it retcons all of that, guys. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
no, don't worry about all the history. Just
Everything,
ignore that. This is the real truth.
everything you thought you knew was a lie, including the fact that the Time Lords were corrupt pieces of shit from the beginning. That was a lie. Now we're gonna make the twist that the Time Lords were evil. Now it's a thing. Now the Doctor can be upset about it. Now the Doctor can be surprised at it. Genuinely,
God.
genuinely, how can anyone watch that episode and think that it's fine and square with everything that's come before it?
And you know what, Cuff? In the last episode we did of this podcast, I went on my Moffat rant for like 10-15 minutes, and one of the things I said was I didn't like sort of the kind of super twisty qualities of some of the plot lines that he put in because, as you pointed out, they're not thought about clearly enough. Well, my God, The Timeless Child is like that, but like 10 times worse, at
Mm-hmm.
least. Like, that is such a poorly considered, world building ignoring piece of writing
And
insanity
see,
that shouldn't be there.
yeah, but and weirdly, something about this episode kind of corroborates the Timeless Child reveal as well. I hate to bring this up
Mm.
because largely
Yeah,
the
go ahead.
Timeless Child reveal makes absolutely no sense. But
Yep.
the idea that the Doctor has way more Artron energy than a normal Time Lord,
Mm.
and that's why he's able to survive in the Thought Matrix for so long.
In the Matrix zone, yeah.
Yeah, when you have the knowledge that he was essentially the first Time Lord where all regeneration energy came from,
Mm.
it kind of makes that make more sense in a weird way.
It does. It's really frustrating because what it
Which is
essentially,
it's so annoying.
yeah, because when you put them together, it's basically saying, oh, the reason why Doctor survived, he's Time Lord Jesus, so that's fine,
Yeah.
you know. Um,
And I
and
hate
it's
that because people take small examples like that, which could be explained by other reasons, and then
yeah,
they go, "Well, you see,
yeah,
it was thought out. He's tying back up this other stuff." And then you go, "Okay, how do you explain the fact that the fugitive Doctor's TARDIS looked like a phone box, even though it shouldn't at that stage of its life, and shouldn't even be the same
yeah,
TARDIS?
yeah.
Explain that one away." I can explain
Um,
the Artron energy thing
mhm,
away. He spent way more time in
mhm,
the time stream than anyone else because he actually travels through time and doesn't observe it. Done.
yeah.
Sorted.
Um, yeah, and it's just such a really frustrating thing that's just been thrown in
Yeah.
by Chibnall. So
Trying to
yeah,
think.
like if anyone wants to turn around and say, "Oh, I got you guys now," you see Artron energy. Did you forget the Artron energy? No, we didn't. We just realized that the Timeless Child is not a good piece of writing. So
It's interesting.
that's it.
I've just
That's all that
checked.
needs to be said.
I believe that when this episode comes out, we will be a month away from the centenary special.
Oh God. Oh,
At some point, and I'm not sure when the final
oh,
trailer comes out for the centenary special, but I feel like when it does, we should do a special episode just talking about that and predictions and thoughts and stuff and
yeah, like a pre episode
yeah, yeah,
episode. Yeah,
which we'll
yeah.
have to
Yeah, sure.
figure out the episode order because who knows when that trailer's going to drop. But
Yeah.
that might be a
Um,
fun one to do, just because like we've had snippets of Chibnall venting throughout this podcast. We of course
yeah.
got to do it a lot during Legend of the Sea Devils, but even here and
Mm,
there we've had small bits and pieces of but no, this thing that makes a lot of sense and is grounded in Doctor Who canon. Chibnall's got something to say
mm.
about that. Um, I think that we could genuinely like spend half an hour theorizing new and inventive ways that Chibnall can fuck up the canon in this final episode.
Yep.
And
Yep.
there could be a canon fuck up in it that we might not even see coming, even with 30 minutes of
Yep.
theorizing. No one knows what's going to happen in the Centenary special, and that should be exciting, but it's just not.
Yeah.
It's
No, it's
terrifying.
terrifying.
It's so scary. But let's get back to
Yeah.
Deadly
We just.
Assassin.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
A couple episodes in a row where we've taken significant chunks of the episode to just bitch about seemingly unrelated Doctor Who stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so this is our second variation of the Master that we've seen for this podcast, I think.
Yes.
We had, yeah, because I'm thinking of the monk. So, no, yeah, the second Master. Peter Pratt. Is this his only
Mm-hmm.
appearance as the Master?
Yes, I think so because he gets replaced with I think because he becomes Anthony Ainsley in at the end of the Keeper of Traken, but he's I don't know if it's Ainsley playing him before, but there's a version of him where he looks less decrepit than he does here, but he's still got like a charred looking face, so I'm not sure whether that's Pratt or not. Um, but yeah, he certainly hasn't been the Master before now.
It's a unique take on the Master, and it's something that absolutely plays into the character that we know. This
Mm.
so obsessed with beating the system and living forever, and
Mm.
that persisting through his last regeneration cycle when he has aged considerably and ridiculously.
Yeah, where he's basically been sort of zombified.
Yeah, it's
He,
it's
mm,
pretty like morbid.
yeah, he he does look pretty creepy and kind of icky, just purely in the presentation. But even the dark cloak, he's got a Grim Reaper quality to him, which is kind of neat. Um, he is he's quite different, I think, to Delgado certainly, but in a way, I don't know if I'd say he's more villainous, because Delgado's got very much that sort of old-fashioned melodrama, twiddling their mustache villainy, but this master is so kind of sort of egotistical and obsessed, and just really kind of obsessed with cruelty that he does become really, really villainous. And I do like the fact that there is a cartoonish quality to the performance, and I think it's hindered by the fact that Pratt is obviously wearing a mask, and it's sometimes hard to understand him.
Yeah.
But there's enough nuance in his performance for me to make it just convincing enough. So I feel like, holy shit, this guy really has kind of lost his mind, and he just wants revenge. As the Doctor says, you'd delay an execution to pull the wings off a fly.
Yeah.
So, and like you said, hatred, it's a strength. I thought, I kind of love that. It's so...
Mm.
It's almost kind of Davros-like in that sense, but it's
Sort of,
it's a bit different.
Real
Though.
quick, Jeffrey Beavers played the Master in The Keeper of Traken before becoming Anthony Ainley at the end.
Okay, cool.
Well, yeah, I think
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense that the Delgado Master is very gentlemanly. He's very refined. He's not very, or at least from the episode that I've seen him in, he's not very aggressive. But it doesn't make a lot of sense that towards the end of his life he would get more and more desperate, and a lot of that persona would just drop away, and he'd be left with, especially after losing to the Doctor so many times, he would have that fury within him.
Yeah, and even the hatred of the Time Lords, like the fact that he's coming to grips with his own mortality. It's kind of one of the reasons why he hates them. Again, because they're very corrupt.
How dare they decide how many times I get to regenerate?
Yeah, which is true. I mean, I guess still, it's still like his hatred is sort of encapsulated in that one fear that he will die if he doesn't, do something.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but he's fun. He's quite fun in this story, and I think he's got an edge to him, a darkness to him, that it makes him just sort of interesting and new and sort of fresh enough to keep it intriguing, which I'm quite fond of. He certainly, even beyond his decrepit appearance, he is still quite formidable and terrifying. I'm glad they brought back the tissue compressor.
Yeah,
because that came in.
The tissue compression technology, the hypnotic properties of the Master.
Yeah,
it's all there. To sort of dodge the fact that this interpretation is so different that they could have just used a new villain for this. Theoretically they keep a lot of the old stuff from the Master. That it's like, oh no, okay, this is the Master. It's not just it's not just a wolf in Master's clothing, so to speak.
Yeah. And it's the fact that it's the tissue compression that finally lets the Doctor know, oh, yes, it's the Master. Well, I mean, he'd probably suspected it beforehand, but like, oh, okay, yeah, it's definitely him, and he, wants revenge. He's got an old score to settle.
Yeah, I like the characters of Castellan and Engen.
Yeah, they're good. They're again, they're quite funny in the sort of officious fuddy-duddy types. They're bureaucrats, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
But there's interesting nuances, even comparing them to each other, which is quite fun.
Well, just also the way Castellan is so snarky with that one main soldier. How he's getting pretty reasonably tricked by the Doctor on many occasions, where it's like, most people would probably have fallen for that stuff. And the way Castellan's like, well, you bumbling idiot, can you not even manage the simplest of tasks? Like, it's playful, which is what prevents me from, saying to the character, well, fuck you too, I'd like to see you do any better. But it's enough where it's like, okay, that's pretty cheeky. I like that a lot.
Yeah, he's also got an interesting nuance where he's set up as a very sort of by the book person. He believes in following the rules. He's got this firm belief in the rules, and that could potentially make him a more unpleasant character, because if he's so sort of committed to maintaining the prestige and the order of Time Lord society, that might mean, oh, he's really, really corrupt too. However, I think it's his precise care and love for the rules that actually makes him a more endearing character, because he wants to make sure that the Doctor is treated fairly after a certain point. So I think that's a really interesting nuance in his character, and I'm
Yeah,
glad that he's there to be this sort of conscience,
he's like the
which is cool.
he's what the Time Lords should be.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not so sticking so close to the rules, but yes, he believes in having a basic rule of law and upholding the Constitution.
Well,
So,
if they are going
um,
to be obsessed with the rules and all that stuff, you'd prefer it to be something like
then they should be
Castellan as
consistent.
opposed
Yeah,
to well, you would want it to be Castellan style, where it's like we have to make sure that everyone's treated fairly, and
yeah,
we give compassion while we do this, as opposed to a regular Time Lord is like
yeah,
we have rules and we must use them to look good.
yeah, yeah. So it's good. So it's having him as a refreshing change, and he's even contrasted to Engin because he's got it's mainly with the performance, but he's got a very uh, sort of dithering old man quality to him.
Yeah,
Um, and having like he's not terrible, like he's not super corrupt, but you still get the feeling he's part of he's one of those sort of corrupt Time Lords where he's just um he's kind of got a bit of a selfishness to him. Having that contrasted to Castellan again is very refreshing, and it's good that they made their characters like that. And they've also got kind of fun banter throughout the episode and helping making sure the audience can catch up on all the weird, wacky plot developments. I want to mention just a couple of flaws that I have noticed with particularly the world building here.
mm-hmm.
Just so we can address those.
Sure.
So with so there are a couple of things. One, when the president dies, given he's a Time Lord, how do they know he's died? Because I feel like if it's just like a shot from like a gun from a staser, isn't it possible for him to regenerate? Or if he's on his last legs in his final form, surely they should have established that or emphasized that, but they didn't really. So again, like I believe it. I believe that they're a society that the upper echelons are kind of so closely knit together. They realize, okay, he's dead. But like, I wanted a bit more proof than that.
I mean, the fact that they there is a bit of time after he gets shot, but where they get a chance to examine the body, and we don't see them doing it. But there is a gap there where it's like until we hear that he's actually dead. I can believe that they would have checked somehow. I mean, it's also pretty well established that there are weapons that can just kill a Time Lord, no regeneration required. The fact that the stasis have these different settings means that it's not 100% clear. We don't learn that until the fourth episode anyway. Before that point, they're pretty much treated as standard.
Yeah.
It's not dead in one go Time Lord weapons sort of thing.
Yeah. I think I just think that was a little bit confusing for me.
I get what you mean. They could have easily have expanded on that a little bit more and really fleshed it out just a tiny bit to make it a bit clearer.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Which is certainly true. The other thing I have with some of the world building, Article 17. Now, it's great that it's in there, and I get why they're doing it, and it's really cool, but like, man, I just feel like they really needed to work on that a bit more, because here's the thing. If we assume this society is as elitist as it is, and it clearly is, why is the Doctor able to work out this loophole? Especially given he's considered like a renegade Time Lord. Like, how does it even work? Is he stripped of all his titles? I mean, they even say he basically renounces his, membership of whatever it is, the Enclave that he's part of. So, like, why him? Why is he able to exploit this loophole? It's a wonderful idea, and it would be really interesting if they worked in it a bit better, but they just didn't quite take it.
Well, they needed
far enough.
They needed a way for him to escape execution, and also it's a fun thing to put in the advertising and on all the promotional imagery. It's the Doctor in classic Time Lord robes, and he's gonna run for president.
Yeah, and it's just it. Because I don't even think they would have needed to do too much to it, especially given how much insane world building they already throw at you in this story. They may as well have put in a bit more, but they could have said something like, "Oh, he may have renounced his membership of this enclave, but technically he's still one of us. He still technically is part of the upper echelons. He still has a right to challenge for the."
That is my interpretation of the scene. Like he's exploiting the uppityness and the elitism of the Time Lords,
Mm, mm,
um, in a way that if they had put any thought in, they would go,
mm,
well, no, you renounced your thing. It doesn't make any sense. But because they
mm,
know that he once was,
mhm,
he's like, they're
mhm,
like, oh, well, the rules. We all have to follow along with this.
mm.
Which
I feel. Mhm,
it definitely is something that needed to be a bit more clear.
mhm.
They probably could have easily worked out a different way to do it, especially because we never really
Yep.
see the presidential challenge happen.
Yeah. I think he does become president in the Invasion of Time, though, which is interesting.
Okay, that's what I'm
Um,
thinking of.
yeah, yeah. But again, I just feel like that needed to be clearer for me again. So these aren't. I don't feel like they're massive. They're not plot holes, but they're signs that this story, because there's so much world building, it is buckling under this weight, and it's not collapsing, but it's getting so close.
I have
So
a I have another question.
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Have we seen Rassilon before this point?
No, I don't
Okay,
believe so. I don't think Rassilon's been mentioned. I mean,
because
the closest sort of. mm,
I was a little
Sorry, go.
confused about the way they describe Rassilon in this as this
Mm.
kind of like messianic Time Lord
Mm.
figure who discovered the Eye of Harmony and
No, no,
harnessed
no,
it to
no.
create.
Cuff? What are you talking about? That's not true at all. The Doctor is Time Lord Jesus. What are you talking about?
Okay, well in that case, Rassilon is Time Lord uh, Moses.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Even
yeah.
though
No, I'm
Moses is before Jesus in the timeline, it doesn't matter.
yeah, no, I'm shitting with you,
Yeah.
but
No,
yes.
no. The Doctor is Time Lord Adam and Eve rolled into one. Rassilon is Time Lord
Oh
Jesus.
yeah, yeah, yep. That makes sense.
So
But
the way they treat Rassilon as this kind of messianic figure who's like,
mm,
he discovered the Eye of Harmony. He
mm,
delved into a black hole and made it out the other
mm,
side and gave us
mm,
Time Lord. He gave us all of our technology and all that stuff.
mm,
And then when you hear that and you go, okay, so there's this been this long
mm,
line of presidents that have been going through, and they some last 900 years, some last only a couple centuries, and then I'm watching this and I'm going, oh yeah, wait, isn't Timothy Dalton Rassilon in the End of Time, and he's the president there? How does that work? Do we
mm.
do we see Rassilon in the classic series at any point, or is Timothy Dalton the first Rassilon we see?
You see a projection of him at the end of the Five Doctors. His face appears I think, on a black screen.
Okay,
Um, and when he punishes Barusa, I think, traps him in this state for all eternity, and then sends the Master back off into time and space.
gotcha.
Um, yeah, I mean, the only other uh sort of Rassilon similar lore that they established before this is someone like Omega, who discovers the power source of Time Lord time travel with by going into that black hole in the Three Doctors.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, um,
And
I think
that
that's the
was
extent of it though.
that was the only main thing that really confused me about this
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
they were talking like Rassilon like he was millennium dead,
Mm-hmm.
like he's been dead for
Mm-hmm.
thousands of years. He's this legendary figure, almost
Mm-hmm.
like a King Arthur kind of thing, where it's
Yeah, yeah.
long in the past. But then it's like okay, but he'll be the president in the future.
Huh.
Unless, like,
Hmm.
we can always blame the Time War for any weird, fucky stuff that happens with canon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because the Time War was this thing where it's like constantly rewriting defeats into victories and victories into defeats and fucking with the
Hmm.
timeline that much where,
Hmm.
maybe Rassilon was brought
Mm-hmm.
back for that. I'm willing
Mm-hmm.
to accept that. It's just something that confused me.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Um, yeah, I think the only one of the other flaws I had, I think, was just right at the end where where they just let the Master go. On reflection, it kind of makes sense again with how corrupt they are, that they'd be so irresponsible to say no, it doesn't matter. He'll just, I just fear the universe isn't big enough for the two of them, but we'll let them both go. But there's one little bit though in that scene that really just got to me. The grandfather clock was right there, people.
Yeah.
Did you not see it? Did you not realize that it's a grandfather clock? If the doctors police box looks out of place. Why is there a weird old relic of human time recording left in
I
in in
mean,
in a in the hall?
I'm see, I'm torn about that because if the chameleon circuit at the TARDIS is meant to blend into its surroundings,
Mhm,
and the Master's one isn't, if his chameleon circuit isn't broken,
mhm,
then it implies that the grandfather clock isn't out of place, but I can't figure out
mhm.
why.
Yeah, it's and the weird thing is I don't think it's broken because
I don't. There's
in
no reason it
in the
should
f-
be.
in the fifth Doctor stories, I think it's Planet of Fire, or it might be the King's Demons. Either way, Anthony Ainsley's master shows up, and his TARDIS I think is a pillar, like
Hmm.
a marble pillar. So it just that scene, just the way it was written, directed, blocked, and performed, it just seemed very strange. And I'm like, it didn't super bother me, but I'm like, I feel like this should have been worked out a little better than this, you
Well,
know?
also, it plays into something that uh, I'm not sure how I feel about in Doctor Who.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this idea uh, that they need to set up how the Master comes back after a supposed death. It's like I'm not interested in
Mm-hmm.
knowing that. I'm just the Master has a contingency plan for when he dies. I'm happy to accept that. I don't need it to explain
Mm-hmm.
how he comes back every time. And in fact, the one time they do properly try to explain a Master resurrection, it's the worst thing ever. It's at the beginning of the end of time where they go through the weird cult ritual with the secret books of Saxon to bring
Mm-hmm.
back the
Mm-hmm.
Master, and it's
Mm-hmm.
so out of place and
Yep.
weird. It's like
Yep.
that's a prime example. It's and uh Missy is introduced. They don't explain how the Master's back. You just accept it. Sasha Dewan's Master comes back, even though we've seen Missy die on screen. I don't want to know why the Master's back.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to
Mm-hmm.
know. I can. If the Master is that paranoid about dying, surely they would not go into any situation ever without knowing they had a way out of it.
Yeah, I mean, and even the doctor says like, "Oh, I didn't see him fall." Wouldn't
Yeah.
that be enough for us to indicate,
Oh
"Oh, I
yeah,
guess we haven't
easily.
seen the end of him"?
Yeah,
So,
you don't need. I don't need to see how he survives every time.
yeah,
Even if the Master has died on screen so much and come back, it's sort of like, yeah, whatever,
yeah,
do it. I don't care.
Espe-
Bring the
especially,
Master back after a death. I'm fine with it. It's firmly established at this
mhm,
point that the Master's dying does not mean anything.
yeah, and I think even by that point in the history of Doctor Who, because that was the first time we'd seen the Master since the third Doctor.
Yeah.
Um, Surely by now we would have gotten the impression that, yeah, this is a recurring villain. It'd be like saying, "Oh, gee, the Daleks, they're completely destroyed.
Mm,
Oh, I hope I don't see them again." Like who would buy that,
sure.
honestly?
So
Um, so yeah, that's a fair criticism.
you've jumped ahead to the ending of this episode, but I want to backtrack a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
so we've discussed this episode for almost an hour now, but we haven't brought up my main problem with the story,
Yeah, go ahead.
and that's episode 3.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Almost the entire thing is the Doctor being hunted by Goth
Mm-hmm.
in the TARDIS Matrix,
Mm-hmm.
which looks like a weird forest place.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yep.
and that's pretty much the whole thing. It's isolated to that.
Yeah, with a couple of cutscenes back to
A couple of cuts back to Gallifrey,
Castellan and Engen. Yeah.
but like, there's also a little bit at the end of episode 2, which is that as well. So there's effectively a full
Hmm.
episode's worth of content of the Doctor being hunted
Yeah,
Jumanji
there's a lot of
style
it.
by a
Yeah.
Time Lord.
Mm.
And it's so slow, and it drags the story to a grinding halt. Like the idea of the Doctor being hunted one on one, no technology, is interesting enough to be its own story.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need it here, especially when in episode 4, right at the start, they figure out how to find the Master in a way that reasonably they could have figured out without the Doctor going into the Matrix. They could have just gone, okay, there's this thing and it connects to this place. Okay, let's just follow it and see if the Master's there. And they do, and he is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't need
Mm-hmm.
this
Mm-hmm.
extended chunk of the episode where the Doctor is basically in survival mode, trying to find
Mm-hmm.
water to drink and bandaging up wounds. It is cool how the Master is able to manipulate the world while the Doctor's trying to bring his leg wound back and all
Mm-hmm.
that stuff. That stuff's cool, but again, it feels like it should be its own story.
Mm-hmm.
I don't.
You feel it's sort of tacked on
It's
here.
tacked on. It's unrelated to the
Mm-hmm.
assassination plot.
To the overplot. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
its only purpose is to set up Goth as the guy, which
Yep.
isn't. It's a twist when it happens. I don't know if I saw it coming before, like a scene or two before it happened,
Mm-hmm.
because before that point, Goth is like he's fixated on getting the Doctor executed quickly, but he gives enough reasons that the Time Lords would want that to happen, where it's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I buy this.
Mm.
So
Yeah. It makes sense.
it is still kind of a twist when it happens, and then when he explains himself, it's like, yeah, no, fair
Mm-hmm.
enough,
Mm-hmm.
Goth. I understand your motivation perfectly. Good villain for the
Mm-hmm.
story.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really. I feel like you could have taken the third episode and instead of
Mm-hmm.
do this weird subplot about the Doctor being hunted, you had time to flesh out some of these elements of the world building that we feel aren't quite up to scratch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
I'm not sure if you feel the same way, because a lot of the stuff that is in episode 3 is really interesting. Like I say,
Mm-hmm.
I would watch an episode that is the Doctor being hunted, but it doesn't fit in this story, is what I'm trying to say.
No, there's a fair criticisms, and I think even when I was watching it the second time, I think there was a moment where I had to sort of scan back and I was rationalizing, oh, why are they doing this again? And it's like, oh, they have to find the master. They have to find. I think I said to myself, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. But you're not wrong to point out, it doesn't quite map on to the rest of the episode as well as perhaps they want it to. And could they have taken care of it in some other means? Indeed, was this whole weird setup just an excuse for, the Doctor Who crew to film on location for a few days in the quarry and in the forest, and have really thrilling, crazy action sequences, and have screaming samurai and gas
Yeah,
mask zombies and crazy clowns and
I,
World
for,
War One
I
fighter
forgot
pilots
about
and
those
poison
elements.
darts?
I forgot about
Pardon?
all that. I forgot about all that weird imagery before the actual hunting begins. I forgot all about
Hmm.
that.
Um, it's interesting. So I definitely understand why you'd criticize it, and you could argue that, as we've said, these are just some of the narrative quirks of classic Doctor Who. In particular, they were perhaps trying to pad it out. They were thinking, well, how do we, make this, four episodes long? Um, Having said that, I still really enjoy it. I understand why you say the pace seems to grind to a halt because it doesn't map onto the rest of it, but I didn't find that the pace let up. Because there's so much insane shit happening. I'm I'm completely comfortable with just watching the Doctor running around, doing like getting involved in this really weird twist of logic, which you could argue, oh, it's a dreamscape. Why is this happening? But I feel like there's enough of the element of sort of psychological torment, that the fact that that the Doctor is in the Master's domain and being hunted by the figments and demons that the Master is creating, I find that to be interesting enough to keep me going, and I like how it kind of helps a little bit with characterization, just really sort of solidifying this weird pseudo psychological grudge match between the Doctor and the Master. So for that alone, I still really, really enjoyed it. I loved, because it's pretty action packed in like what is actually happening. You've got the Doctor doing crazy things, falling down from trees, running from controlled explosions, having a fighter pilot fire at him from a plane, coming across clowns and samurai, and getting stuck on a train track, and then the really pretty shocking cliffhanger when you find out it's Goth and he's strangling the Doctor and saying, "Finish, Doctor, you're finished," which is pretty full on. I enjoy it for all of those reasons. It doesn't bother me that much, and I'm happy to sort of go on this strange detour. I think it goes back to something that I've said before. I'm comfortable with stories that have slightly lax plots, that have um, plots that meander a little bit. Now, having said that, as I've also said before on this podcast, you could argue that since Doctor Who is, again, one of these sort of classic stories, forms of storytelling, It's not meant to be like super super experimental. You could argue maybe it, even in this era, can't afford to be sloppy with its plot. So
Well,
I again I disagree with you to the extent that I really enjoyed it, but I think it's completely understandable that you would um feel that way about it because yeah, it doesn't have quite a bearing.
if the whole thing had been the Doctor being tortured by the Master in this hellscape he's
Mm,
created, I think it would have been
mm,
fine. I think just the fact that it essentially becomes a story that you could do outside of that, like if you have the say the Master hijacks the Doctor's TARDIS, abandons him on this planet, and then starts hunting him, which is what it
mm,
becomes, as opposed to a psychological hellscape where the Master's able
mm,
to manifest anything to try and test the Doctor or whatever. Like those are two
mm.
different things that happen, and at a certain point, I completely forgot about the weird psychological stuff
Yeah.
shortly into the actual hunting,
Mm,
and the whole time I'm watching it and I'm going, why is this in this story?
mm,
Why
mm,
isn't this its
mm,
own thing? Like I would be
mm.
maybe it's because they only had one story without a companion and they wanted to make the most of it, so they did a Gallifrey thing and also an isolated Doctor thing. But there were ways you
Yeah.
could isolate the Doctor even when a companion was in the story.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I mean, I'm. It's all well and good if you can, if you can look past it. But even though I
mm,
enjoyed quite a lot of it, it didn't. It stuck out like a sore thumb
mm,
in this
mm,
story, and I can't really. When they could have either just done master psychological stuff or used that time to properly establish the world building elements that we feel are a bit lackluster, maybe we can actually see
mm,
the presidential challenge happening, and the Doctor is able to expose Goth that way.
mm.
Maybe I think that would have
Yeah,
made a bit
sure,
more
sure.
sense and would have justified Article 17 as well.
Yeah.
So it's just another example of overstuffing that I wasn't quite on board with at the end.
Yeah, sure, sure. Um, I think in a way it kind of goes back to what I said in that you know I said sometimes the story can lag a lot with Doctor Who. And the reason why I said this story doesn't is because again for me, purely just in terms of the amount of content we're getting, there's a lot happening, but you again, as you say, you could easily make the argument that all the crazy things that are happening, they're not having that much of a bearing on the plot. And I wonder if it goes back to that old sort of feeling about classic Who, where it's like, oh, you only need to watch like the first and last episode. I mean, I don't think that's literally true here, but it speaks to the issue that you have with it, that this weird detour, while action packed and really crazy, it doesn't map onto the rest of the plot, so it feels like a stagnation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Weirdly,
again,
weirdly, I think that episode 3 is way more of a stagnation than the beginning of episode 4, where you think the Master's dead.
mm,
I think
mm-hmm,
those moments are. I wasn't. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna pretend that it's as fast paced as the rest of the story. But
mm,
because you've seen the cliffhanger of episode 3 and you know that
mm,
this can't be the end of the Master, there must be
mm,
something else. You're seeing it the whole time,
yep,
going, okay, well, what's he actually gonna do then? What's the plan here?
yep,
There's
yep,
this weird sense of dread that's coming in, where it's like, the Master's not
mm-hmm,
actually dead, so what's
mm-hmm,
going on? And
mm-hmm,
when you
mm-hmm,
find out what it is, you're like, oh, okay, oh god, that's bad. Let's get back into it. So I think it works well enough there.
mm,
Um, I didn't mind that because
mm-hmm,
again, it wasn't when the Master's dead and there's still 20 minutes of airtime. You're like, it's
mm,
less that you're like, oh, okay, we know he's not dead. It's more like,
mm.
oh, well, we know he's not dead.
But yeah, what's he got up his sleeve now?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, which makes sense. Um, I wonder even if would you say that you could have cut this down to 3 episodes basically and made it just slimmer, or would you have to take that time to focus more on the world building?
I think you could take a fourth episode. Maybe you could add in some others. Um, see, I don't know what you could do. You could
Hmm.
expand the
Hmm.
investigation a little bit. Maybe
Hmm.
had it been established by this point that humans aren't allowed on Gallifrey?
Um, I don't know. I don't think it had because there'd been no. I don't think any human had ever gone to Gallifrey up to that point.
Right.
I mean, I know like there've been sort of encounters, I think, with obviously with different Time Lords, but I don't think it had been a companion on Gallifrey before.
Right.
So, hmm,
Well, I'm just trying to think if you add a companion into
hmm,
this, maybe does that fix it? But maybe that overstuffs episode one when the Doctor's trying to stop the
yeah, yeah,
assassination. I
yeah,
I don't know. I think there are things you can do to make this story 4 episodes.
hmm,
So I think it deserves it. I wouldn't want to see this reduced to 3 because I think it does need a little
hmm,
extra breathing
hmm,
room in some
hmm.
parts.
Yeah, because there's so much other stuff happening.
Yeah,
They're just bombarding you with all this world building. It's nuts.
I don't know. It's an interesting one. I don't know exactly
Hmm,
how to fix it, but I know
hmm,
that in its current form, it's flawed, but I still enjoyed most of it.
yeah. I wonder, the whole bit of the Doctor being sort of trapped in his mind and in the Matrix. I wonder if you could have done something similar to the admittedly really, really wacky turn of events in the Three Doctors with the Doctor facing Omega's dark side of his mind, and it's this slow motion, close quarters kung fu fight
Oh God.
between the Third Doctor and this guy dressed in a monster costume. That's the cliffhanger. I think it's of part three, and it's so brazenly bizarre, and it goes back to the fact that I love that Doctor Who's willing to take these wacky risks, but it looks so strange. But you could argue that that's doing what this is doing, but kind of better, because it's a conflict, and yes, it's kind of psychological, but they're not wasting too much time on it. It's like cliffhanger of episode 3, bit of episode 4, that's it. And I wonder if they could have done something similar to show us that psychological aspect, to show that the
Well,
Doctor is lost in the Matrix, but not meander on it for what is essentially at least an episode long.
my main thing is that he goes into the
Mm,
Matrix to try and find the Master.
mm-hmm,
But the main thing he learns while he's in there is that Goth is the one that killed the president.
mm,
The way that
mm-hmm,
they find the Master is by examining stuff outside of the Matrix once he wakes up from it, which is
mm-hmm,
stuff
mm-hmm.
they could have done in the first place. So all you need to do
Because
is have the Doctor, while he's in the Matrix, actually find out something about the Master's location that he couldn't have learned outside of it, and it fixes the problem.
I'll challenge that slightly. I could easily be wrong, but would they have been able to find out those clues to where the Master is without knowing that Goth was in on it? Did they need to
Well,
interrogate him and ask him about what happened, or no? I think they probably
they
knew
do that
about the
afterwards.
Master.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
they know before then that the Master is somehow involved with the Matrix because they figure that
Yeah.
he's the one that tampered with the Doctor's
Yeah.
um, information, which you can
Yeah.
apparently only do from either from in the
Yeah.
Matrix or being connected to it in some way. Like you have to be close to
Yeah.
it. So they could have
Yeah.
easily just followed the path that they follow
Yeah.
in the first place. They
Yeah.
don't need to go inside because it's not like they find
Mm,
out that Goth is involved and then they go, "Oh,
mm,
easy, we can just track Goth's location. He's in the
yeah.
sewer. Let's go get him." So like
Mm,
I
mm, mm,
there may be something I'm forgetting, but from I watched it literally this morning. I don't think there was anything important about the Master that they learned from the Doctor
mm,
going to the Matrix.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Um,
Um,
I mean, I still like the episode. I think it does
yeah.
enough in terms of world building and also the Master dynamic with the Doctor and
Yeah.
Gallifrey, which is always interesting to see.
And the
I
climax is really fun
The
too.
climax is fun, yeah. Even though I did kind of laugh when it was like wearing a sash can save you from a black hole. Okay,
Mm.
okay, Doctor Who.
I can put that just down to, I mean, you could argue it's just a bit of Time Lord magic game, but I can believe it because it's like the most important thing. Um, and even in something like Remembrance of the Daleks, you've got something like the Hand of Omega, so like this one specific device that can do all this timey-wimey Time Lord magic. I believe that, but I can understand why you would maybe feel slightly abrasive
Well,
towards that.
it's more the case of like so the Rassilon harnessed the Eye of Harmony to basically create
Mm,
Time Lord society. He gave them all the
mm,
different time travel technology. Cool.
mm,
So how did he have the technology to survive the black hole in the first place before he did
mm,
all that?
mm,
That's the bit that has
mhm,
that's the
mhm,
sticking point for me. I can believe Time
mhm,
Lord
mhm.
magic to a certain extent, but this is how they
Yep.
got the Time Lord magic.
Mm. Yeah.
That's a snake
Yeah. Fair enough.
that's a snake eating itself. I don't
Yep. Mhm.
but yeah, that's a very minor thing. It's not something that I dwelled on too much.
Mm,
It's just when he said it, I was like, okay
mm,
then, and then I promptly forgot about it. So
mm.
it's whatever.
Yeah,
Let's
fair. Yeah,
score
yeah, yeah.
this thing.
Yeah, sure, sure. I'm gonna go with an 8 for me.
I'm at a solid 7.
Sure, sure thing. Um, yep, I think that's
Yeah, I mean,
again slightly disagree, but I think that's fair.
yeah, I don't think I'll happily rewatch it at certain points. There's enough
Hmm.
really good stuff here that'll
Yeah,
keep me coming back, and I can just zone out during episode 3 and be happy.
yeah, fair enough.
Well, next week we're going to be checking out Boomtown, the final episode of the Eccleston era before the two-part finale, and unfortunately, an episode that sets up the finale in a big way, so it's unskippable,
Hmm.
and it's a shame.
Yeah,
Ah,
we'll see how we endure it.
oh, Boomtown, you pile of shit. Until then, I've been Alex,
I've been Fitz.
and may you always be wearing your sashes of Rassilon, else you stumble into a black hole and end it all.
Fair enough.
Good night, and God bless. Rassilon bless, sorry.